My students do sing with a nice choral. They sing it correctly with a nice choral sound. All people are thinking, well, he's teaching by rote. I had to give that disclaimer. They're singing. They have that soft palate arched, tall vowels. They're doing it correctly. But it took me had to get there another way.
Right.
So because I know some people. So someone reached out to me. They were saying, so it's crazy. Some of the questions I received and I'm like, wait, what? So someone did ask. They say, so yeah, I love you said that. Maintaining that an arch in the soft palate. It feels weird. Thank God, my students don't have to do that no more. I'm like, no, whoa, wait a second. Are you taking this out of context? I never said they don't have to do that.
Yep.
I listed these 6 things in regards to what they may not be comfortable doing. You gotta get them there, though.
Recently, I came across a shining light of logic, compassion, and advocacy in the form of ChoralNet blogger, an article by Odell Zeigler IV. The article was shared far and wide, and it became clear to me right away that these ideas needed to be amplified on this show. They are so aligned in so many ways with topics that I've discussed with many colleagues over the last 2.5 years, so it just had to happen. I encourage you to read this short article, which is in the show notes that he wrote, and it won't take you, even if you pause this recording right now and jump into that article, it'll take you 3 or 4 minutes to read and then jump right back in so that you have context. I believe that this topic is critically important right now as we continue to grapple with what it really means to move the music education world in a more equitable direction. Are we focused on processes and the root causes leading to improved outcomes later, or are we focused on outcomes now while glossing over the processes? I'm concerned it's the former, and I would prefer the latter. So I appreciated Odell's take as I read with excitement because he brings process solutions to the table, which is what we desperately need. Do we have students that aren't comfortable using solfege or singing with certain vowel formants, or because it feels weird to sing with some vibrato, etc.? Of course we do. We all do, no matter where we teach. Don't give up on them, or worse, fall into the trap that if this is not something they enjoy right away, well, then I guess it's not for them. They deserve a rich education. If they are learning something when they come to you that they already knew from their iPods, what are you really giving them? Right? There is a process that every kid deserves when they come into a choral classroom, and Odell kind of lays that out, and he does it from his lens, which is working in urban classrooms. And what I found interesting in having this conversation is that I identified with a lot of them, a lot of the things that he sees in suburban classrooms as well. Of course, you could quibble about how frequently those things happen and how common those types of things are with teenagers, but I think ultimately these are things that we all need to think about, no matter what context we teach or direct, students, adults, it doesn't matter. I think you're going to find this episode enlightening, eye-opening, and hopefully it'll make you scratch your beard and think. And don't forget, the Choralosophy podcast is entirely listener-supported. That means no revenue comes into the show from an outside source unless you, the listener, take action. One way to do that is to join the Patreon for as little as $3 a month. Patreon.com/Choralosophy is a supporters subscriber community, has a private podcast in addition to the main feed. It also has a shared Google folder for resources and rubrics and extra content. Variety of things that you can do there. And plus, you get to the front of the line when you have questions for me about things that happen on the show. The producers over at the Patreon page are Vasquez Academy of Music, John Warner, Ulrika Igrain Munoz Alarcon, Chandler Smith, David Kowalczyk, Kyle Peterson, Michael Herron, Ryan Main, and Steve and Kathy Kakachik. Another way that you can support, of course, is to use the promo code Choralosophy at checkout at ryanmain.com, graphitepublishing.com, sitereadingfactory.com on your membership and your students, mymusicfolders.com, mychoirroads.com, anytime you need some of their awesome gear, as well as Voce Vista Video, vocevista.com/Choralosophy. Okay, everybody, I'm here with Odell Zeigler the fourth.
Yes.
The fourth of the Odells, and we are going to be talking about some unconventional approaches to teaching chorus, teaching choir classes in a variety of settings. But Odell, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
So, of course, I came across you. You just came out with a ChoralNet blog. and it was really, really good. It was called An Unconventional Approach to the Urban Chorus Classroom for the New Choral Director. So you kind of have a specific audience in mind, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very applicable to a lot of concepts that we think about and we talk about as choral directors. So we're going to kind of dive through that. But before we do, would you just introduce yourself to the audience? Who are you? Where do you come from? What makes you tick?
Yes. All right. So my name's Odell Zeigler. I'm from Chicago, Illinois. I grew up in Chicago, Illinois. Attended schools through Chicago Public Schools, and finished my undergraduate degree at North Central College in Naperville, Illinois, in music and in psychology. And then we moved to the East Coast for graduate school at the University of Rhode Island, where I received my master's in music education. I did some teaching in Illinois, and I also have taught in Rhode Island. And then now we're in Virginia, in Norfolk, Virginia, at the secondary level, teaching chorus at Booker T. Washington High School. So I will say I've taught pretty much at all the levels so far.
Okay.
This is my ninth year of teaching. So, but we started at elementary, and actually I did well, my shortest stint was at the middle school level, and then we've been at the high school level for the last 4 years. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
That's awesome. Now, would you describe, since you wrote this blog about the urban setting, would you describe your current setting as an urban setting?
Yeah, so where I'm at is definitely urban. Yes.
Okay. And since you use that term, I just, to be clear for everyone who's listening, when you say urban, what is wrapped up in that term for you?
Well, so for me, when I think of urban, and I use that instead of inner city, and I think they're synonymous in a way, depending on who you talk to. But when I think of urban, I think of a school district where there's predominantly minority students and learners. That's how
Okay.
I look at an urban school district. Although the community can be urban and not rural, right? But I define it more so by the demographics of the students, the of students.
Good. Yeah. Okay. I'm glad you said that because I was going to say that was one of my first thoughts. I like to be very precise with language, and
Hmm.
when we think about like urban could just mean city,
Right.
but and depending on the city that you're in, if it's Atlanta, we're talking about probably 80-90% Black kids. But
Hmm.
if it's the city of Portland,
Right.
you might not be thinking about so that's why it's good and helpful to kind of think about so it's good to know how you think of it, and so in your article, one of the things that caught my eye was, first of all, I love that you started the blog with a John Locke quote, which was, new opinions are always suspected and usually opposed without any other reason but because they are not already common, which I think this is really important. And I wanted to start there since you started there. Why did you include that quote? What was your inspiration for including that in your blog?
Well, I think I want the readers to understand right away that it's an opinion.
Yeah.
And it's not what I'm speaking of. It's nothing that I can consider it as facts because it has worked in my experience, my own experiences. But I wanted the readers to first of all like kind of be relaxed, and this is why I started saying, hey, this is really an opinion. And
Hmm.
although it might be uncommon, this is kind of the way I think, and what I think is successful because of my experience. So I started that quote to kind of relax the readers, but also to get them it was kind of like an attention getter in a way too, because they're thinking like, oh, what he's about to say, he's talking about something that may not be common, or so I
Uh-huh.
was trying to grab their attention, the reader's attention, but at the same time let them know it's just an opinion.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
and you kind of you alluded to that later in the article too, which I appreciated, and I think as somebody who, I can identify with that already, because of course I make my part-time living on this show, giving my opinions, controversial and otherwise, of that it's important that we have these conversations, and it's also important that we do it in a way that opens ourselves up to what you just did, which is to say, this has worked for me. It doesn't mean it's going to work for you, but I think you should think about it because it worked for me, and maybe if you tried some of these things, it would work for you. To me, that's how colleagues talk. Like that's how we speak.
And yes, and I tell people, they say, well, no, and it's not even about being, putting on a humility, it's not. It's just being frank. And what you said,
Hmm.
I agree 100%. But also, and I mean, this is kind of political here. We live in a different day and time now, where you got to watch what you say. The language it should be precise. You got to be clear about what you say. We live in, a place where you get counseled easily,
Yeah.
or people look at you as, oh, he thinks he's God, or he's this, he knows this, and he's trying to invalidate what we've been doing or saying we're doing it wrong. And I just
Hmm.
think, as a blogger, as a presenter, a speaker, really trying to remove biases, and really trying to get readers and listeners to understand, hey, open, try this or think about it in this way. And so that's kind of, my approach to writing and speaking. And I should share this. I was presenting one time at Massachusetts Music Educators Association conference. The keynote speaker came down to me, and I shook her hand, and she looked at my session and said, "Oh, you're talking about gospel, spirituals, and more, and music of the African diaspora." That was the title of my session. And I said, yeah, I said, I can't wait. This when I was a young teacher. I said, and I'm still young. I said, I can't wait to get in here and change these people's minds. I can't wait. I was just so foolish, just looking back like, wow. She says, listen, your job is not to change anyone. Your job is just to make them think. And so that's kind of my approach. Get the audience, get the listeners, get the presenters. Get the audience, the listeners, and the readers to kind of get in a state of comfortability, that they are willing to be open and digest what you have to say. And that's that starting quote. And then, as you said later on, I kind of make sure that I kind of harken back to that type of thing, letting them know like, hey, this may work for you, it may not, or this could be a jump start. And then I even had a disclaimer in parentheses, where I said, oh, this is not indicative of all urban school district, and it may apply to school district outside the urban community. So we're trying to be once again inclusive, and getting the readers and listeners to understand that
Right.
an opinion, and maybe you can think about it.
Yeah, and I think that's important. In fact, that's a good jumping off point directly into the article, because I want to kind of dig through it for the reader who, or sorry, the listener who might be not a reader. Maybe they won't ever read the article, but maybe they'll listen to us talk about it, which is good. But the idea that your ideas that you discuss are possibly applicable to a non-urban setting. They're also possibly not applicable to certain urban settings, and especially because if you think about that you kind of address this to the new choral director. Well, what if I'm hypothetically here, there's an urban setting with a seasoned teacher who's been there for 20, 25 years, and they've got a program going that has kind of norms, and they do things in a certain way. Maybe that teacher doesn't need this article because they've already figured out something that works, but maybe there's also a non-urban setting that the new teacher is having trouble connecting with kids in whatever reason, and so this is all very good. So I want to start kind of in your main thesis here, and again to get kind of a clear definition of terms. So you use things like in your article, conventional and not conventional. And so when you say that, what do you mean? So if someone is teaching in a conventional way to you, what does that mean?
So when I think of conventional teaching, I think of um, teaching according to the textbook, or if you're subscribing, to a specific pedagogue.
Hmm.
So I'm thinking, first, I'm going to fast forward to rewind, but I'm thinking in terms of, like, I think of general music first, immediately. When I taught elementary, music, I was Kodai head. But I would tell people I'm not married to none of them. You can see some Kodai in my lesson, you can see some Dalcroze, you could see this and that. But still, at the same time, I had my own type of creativity added to, whatever else I was subscribed to. So when I think of conventional teaching, I think strictly by the textbook, strictly by the method or the sequence that this particular person, or says that we should be teaching a
Hmm.
particular concept or a particular method. And so I think of that as conventional teaching. And then I think of unconventional teaching is just really just deviating from I won't use the word standard because that's kind of, but deviating from the norm or deviating from pretty much, some of the things and concepts and methods that, we pretty much do and we all stand common ground on in regards to like introducing a piece, or yeah, I'll just say introducing a piece. I think that's probably the
Uh-huh.
biggest one. I would say that's probably the biggest one.
Yeah. Yeah. I just kind of echo what you said, but it's saying it in my way, I guess, which would be that are you allowing someone who, like you said, a pedagogue, but someone who wrote a book or taught a methods class that's never been in your classroom and never met your kids, dictate how you do things? In which case, that's a problem.
I love
You
that. I
you
love
know,
that. But Chris, if you look at that article too, I talked about I subscribe to those things too because I
right.
because I don't want people to get mixed up and say, okay, wait, what is he doing here? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, how is this guy teaching chorus? Like, is he is he just winging and shooting it from the hip? I mean, is he bringing all his ideas and which is your creativity matters and all that. But I think there's foundational principles that we must subscribe to. I think there's certain things we all stand common ground on. But I like how you went ahead and just I liked how you just defined that. Are we allowing a particular person who wrote this book or a teacher who has
Right.
never seen this group of kids or who don't know anything about this program that I'm trying to build or even that I have up and running, are we allowing them to kind of dictate to us how we teach, although they're nowhere near in vicinity of this particular
Right.
campus or program?
And if you're thinking about the urban schools, especially, of course, in my age group, I can't think of a choral methods group or study or a book that I would have ever written or read in the late 90s when I went to school, that would have been describing the urban setting when they were talking about a choir classroom. So, there's that part of it too. I think it just requires the thinking on our feet and the taking, because I agree with you. It doesn't mean you ignore those methods. They're valuable. Somebody put a lot of work into those. But I think it's just that, we all as teachers, we take little pieces of somebody's method. We take little ideas from somebody's textbook or whatever, and then we take those ideas and we project them onto our students and say, okay, what works, what doesn't work, and can I then pivot, and can I be flexible when they don't, essentially, and come up with something else? Is that kind of how you experience
Yeah,
this
yeah.
in the real
So,
world?
so I think it's interesting. So, being in the urban setting most of my career, although there was a few positions where I was not, I was in affluent communities, and it's a different story. But based on my experience in the urban setting, I typically sometimes, and I have this habit, I go in and I try to do it, sometimes, and I'll be honest, sometimes by the book, the way I was taught, and I was, we all talk about the great professors we've had, and I try to do it the way I was taught, and because it's a tried and true method, obviously, it's been proven through research and things like that. And like you said, when I see that there's issues, or I see that there's some type of hiccups, or that it's not, is not working out, then I do pivot. And I've learned how to pivot, if that makes sense. So, and
Mhm.
I think it was about 3 years ago I learned really how to pivot in these settings, because I kept at one point running into the same type of wall. And I said, what do we do here? We can't always get to the last minute of a concert, preparing for a concert and get frustrated and, try to, pull off a miracle or call extra rehearsals. And, how do I, set these students up for success right at the beginning in September, August, whenever you start school? And that's it. And that was my mindset, now in this particular setting, so that's my approach.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. So I want to go look in back into the article now. You listed in the article 6 things that a director might come across in an urban setting, but then, as we mentioned earlier, you're acknowledging that they might come across this anywhere, but that this is something that you've seen in your experience in urban settings as challenges. And I'm just gonna, before you respond, I'm just gonna read through those 6 for the audience so that they can hear those. Um, so the way you set this up was to say that rather than point to the overall barriers within urban education, I insisted, and this is Odell speaking, I instead want to share a few issues for the new choral director that may be permeating through their urban choral program. Here are a few issues, etc. And number 1, solfege. and you said that they may have always sung on words, so this might be new to them. Number two, sheet music. They may have always been taught by rote. Number three, sight reading. This might be just a completely foreign concept, which is, yeah, I can see that. Number four, maintaining an arched soft palate, and I would imagine you're kind of alluding to all types of vocal pedagogy type
Mhm.
things there, like tongue placement was your number five, and just classical literature, unfamiliar with the style. So basically asking, it sounds like you're describing a list, like what if you were trying to describe to a flock of birds what it's like to swim in the ocean, right? If these are completely foreign concepts,
Mhm.
you'd first have to explain what water is, and you'd first have to explain, there's all these types of things. So it sounds like that this is you're challenging us to think about, in our methods textbooks, we tend to read about the hypothetical where the kids have some type of frame of reference already, at which point you then can start doing this. But what if you have to start from scratch? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm
Hmm.
getting at. I mean, when you look at choral methods books, it seems to be, catering to pretty much a group of singers at the, in the high school level, that, the assumption that they have, a certain, they're at a certain level in regards to music literacy.
Hmm.
And then, but I think that we have to sometimes think that there are places, urban and non-urban, where you go in and the music literacy skills are low to none. They have no idea. They have none. I mean, for various reasons. Middle school could have been. They could have had uh, a substitute teacher the whole year. They could have had 3 or 4 teachers through the entire middle school. So it could be various reasons. But I think, as you said, it's based upon pretty much all the choral method books I've read. It's like, okay, this does not apply to
Right.
me, at least, or in my, you know, in regards to my program. And so then what do we do? And that's why I started then, listing those things and thinking of different things that, that I've run into.
Okay. So, one of the things that I appreciate about the article, and feel free, this is the nature of the show, is feel
Mhm.
free if I put your words in your mouth to just say, no, 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 that's not what I'm saying. Um, I'm a big kid, I can handle it. It sounds to me like you are saying here that because these challenges exist, it doesn't mean that you don't teach those things. It means that you figure out different ways to teach those things than are in the methods book. Is that a fair assessment of what you're?
Correct, exactly.
Okay.
So we subscribe to those things, but how do we get them there? But we got to get creative, and we got and the route and the path to that is different for these particular students,
Hmm.
and so you definitely want to get them there. In my opinion, is I tell people all the time. I say I'm more traditional than contemporary. People don't believe it or not. I call myself a young old man. You look at my choral, you look at my concerts. I'm gonna have a rope piece on every time. And people says, "Wait." I'm really, I'm more of a traditionalist, believe it or not. But for me, running across, like I said, these urban programs I've been, I've been fortunate to lead. I've had to find different paths or different routes for them to take to get to these things that are often discussed in these choral method books, or you know, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So just to kind of take it into the more specific from your list, if you've got a group of kids in front of you, they've never sung a song on solfege, or they've never really tried to sight read, it's all been rote, taking those examples, or, sheet music, never
Mhm.
held it in their hand. I've had that experience in a non-urban setting. It was more of a rural setting. My very first teaching job, straight out of college, I kid you not, I handed out sheet music to all the kids,
Mhm.
and most of them looked at it, kind of flipped it upside down, and just set it on the floor and stared at me. It was, and I grew up in a more traditional choir
Uh-huh.
setting in a high school. So to me, I grew up doing this. So this was weird. And they had no idea what to do with it. It wasn't that they didn't know how to read it. It was more than that. They didn't even know where to look. They didn't know how to hold it. It was completely, and it's back to the beginning of our conversation too, where you're trying to
Uh,
qualify urban. This was a 100% white classroom of,
mm,
rural kids with farmer parents. And to me, what's interesting about it is it's the frame of reference that's missing. That I had to start those kids from scratch too. I've been there. It's been a while since I've been there, but I have been there. And so and the idea though is that we don't look at those kids and say, well, I guess this is going to be a challenge for them, so we're not going to teach this to them. We're just going to do everything by rote. Well,
Hmm.
no,
Hmm.
maybe rote is my way in,
Yes.
to get them singing and get them feeling confident in their voice, so that the tune that I model for them by rote can then be translated later to them into solfege. And oh, hey, that song that we know, did you hear that? That's do re mi. Oh, whoa.
Hmm.
And then they can start to make those connections. And so I appreciate that, because I think that is really, really important. There is, I feel like sometimes in our world, an idea that if it's really hard for the kids, we should just toss it off to the side and do something else.
Hmm.
But this is beneficial for them.
Yes. Thanks for sharing that. Definitely, I am. Know, your story in regards to even having experienced that in urban setting. So I interesting. Sheep. What did I do with this? What is this?
Yeah.
I
Yep.
failed to write in that because it's always interesting. You go back and watch yourself or teaching a lesson. At those days back in the day, or even if you go back and read something you wrote, you're like, oh, but I should haven't wrote. So what I wanted to include in the article, which I forgot. Now, I wrote teach with the score, but they must follow they must have the score in their hand. So it's not
Hmm.
wrote teaching without the score. I was like, darn, I should have put that in there because I think that's important for the readers to know too. So I wish I could have add like some type of addendum, but yeah, they when I wrote teach, the students they will have a score in their hand now.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not me just wrote teaching to them. Now, depending on what it is, like I for my Christmas concert for one group, the students were like, can we just do Silent Night? It's like, we all know it. And I was like, well, okay. I don't have to pull out the music for that. You guys know it. I wrote taught that without any sheet music, but everything else that was wrote taught, they had a score in their hand. And as you talked about, we had to, from the beginning stages, we talked about, systems, first systems, look at the page number. This is how we define systems in score. Second
Yeah.
system, and then we started with that. And I will say this because I don't hardly ever, and I will say never, and I don't. And in my experience, I'm hoping that this is most people's experience. Hoping they have some form of literacy, even if it's just them knowing a quarter note gets one beat in 4/4, half note gets two. They have that. And so that particular the group I have now, I'm speaking to my program now, they had in literacy rhythmically they were okay. It
Okay,
was
good.
in terms of melody pitch wise it was like okay. So they were able to follow along with the score. If I said, hey, let's just clap the rhythm here, let's clap from the beginning all the way up until measure whatever,
Hmm.
they were able to successfully do that for the most part. I had to guide some, but I said, well, this is good. And I even, if there's a piece where there's a piano introduction, okay, let's count. And then I want you to clap right when we come in. So if we come in, for example, we come in measure 7, piano play, measure 7, we clap, when we come in on beat 1, or we come in measure 6 on the end of 4, whatever, clap right when we enter. And so we do things like that. So I wanted to, as I look back, when I define rote, I should, for me, this is what I do. There's rote teaching with notation in their hands. Because here's my belief, because um, the goal is music literacy, and I want to say that. And this, once again, this is just my belief and my opinion. Um, is to get them, become music literate. How we get them there is just what we were talking about in that particular
Yeah.
blog. Because I
Yeah.
had some people reach out to me and they're like, yeah, thank you for saying that. They don't have to read the music. Let's just sing. And I'm like, no, that's not what I'm saying. Let's get this right. I'm saying, if we're going to introduce a piece, for example, I was fortunate to teach in a district one time, maternity leave. It was a fluent district, and the choir, we had some great readers in there. These are all pretty much, about 6 to 7 students would make all state easily, and the other students had a chance. And so I was able to start with providing the information about the background of this piece. I presented an overview of this composition. That was like step 2, just following the textbook. Step 3, I said, hey, let's just kind of sight read this through. Let's sing this on a neutral syllable, or let's sing this on solfege. They were able to do it. Okay, we did that. And then had them start directing. They started marking their score. We started modeling the text. And we started putting the words and music together and isolating and combining the part. Then the macro micro thing. I was like, wow, this is just like I learned it. I mean, this is great. But the point it escapes me now. But I've been fortunate to be in that setting, and that worked. But then, in my urban setting, that's the goal for me still. And I want to be clear about that, because I don't want people to look at it as, well, why we just can't do, teach by rote and they could just sing and sound wonderful.
Because it takes forever. It,
Yes.
it takes forever. And I'd like to do other things. I'd like to talk about poetry, and I'd like to talk about vocal pedagogy, and I'd like to talk about, so literacy is crucial. So that is you're definitely in agreement here on this show. We're a big sight reading show here.
Thank you.
And but one of the things and I'm glad you say that, because using rote as a tool for teaching and building overall literacy is different than teaching by rote exclusively, because sight reading is not that important anyway. Like, to me, those are two totally different positions. And so one of the ways I think about it, for example, I'll kind of explain in my program, in case you haven't listened to any of my sight reading episodes, is we read entirely a cappella. So no notes are played for kids ever from the first day of school. And we start on the first day of school, they get do, and that's it. And if it's painful and they can't figure out where this note goes to this note, we sing a scale from this note to this note until they figure it out. And so one of the things that's interesting about that method is that a lot of times people kind of shoot at sight reading, and the criticism is, well, but sight reading ignores the ear because it's all just about reading. Well, no, it's not. Because if you're sight reading a cappella, you've got to have a rote background. In other words, I need to have experienced and sung and heard by ear what do re mi sounds like 100 times before I can read do re mi. And that's important. And so there is rote, there is ear, there is all of this, but to me, it's not either or. These are things you do all at the same time.
Thanks for sharing that. I mean, and I agree, because I do something similar. So we sight read in acapella. Same thing. But with my group, when the assessment, my pre-assessment, I said, okay, you know what? First, for me, what I had to do with my group this year was, we had to really just practice, singing a major scale. And so weekly, since the beginning of September, the scores are going up now. And I will be honest here, I was grading them harsh, and why I did that at the beginning, I wanted them to understand how important it was for them to be able to sing a major scale in acapella with good intonation and rhythmic flow. So each week for me, they have to sing it. We've been doing this since September. They have to sing a major scale, sing and sign, up the scale and back down. And because, and so we've been doing that every week. And then now we've done it where you go up with one hand, you come back down with the other hand. And, but acapella. And then we've been, I've used these melody flashcards. We've taken through this pretty much book. It's by Patty DeWitt. And we started with pretty much, the book starts. It's pretty, the process of this book is great. You can just open it and go through it. I've taught it for the last couple of years, and I've found success in it. So, but we've started with it starts with just so me, and then, pretty soon it adds, la, and then I think now we at a pentatonic scale right now. But the thing is that we've shown I've given different worksheets out where do moves, because, one of the problems I found with this particular curriculum was that everything do was always C. I said, So I had to find a way to kind of articulate to them, pretty much in terms of intervals and shapes. So how do we find, what does do to so look like? What does so to la look like? So we've gone to that, but I went on a little tangent. But the point is, what you just said about the a cappella sight reading, that's kind of, that's the same thing we do. And I talked about in that article, I think, finding ways to make it fun. I just make a game out of it. I just try to make a game out of it. So we split the room in half. We'll do even Simon Says solfege, or we'll do something where I'll have a student come up and have the student present her card, his or her card, and they will pick the student to sight read their card. And it has become so fun for the students now, because for them, they've made it into this whole "I got you" moment. I got you, Oh, you're gonna sight read this, and they're finding joy in that. Trying to, and their classmate, and they're having fun with it. And I said, I never thought you guys. I'm looking up. I'm sitting there saying, they really think this is fun, and so, but I've done things like that, and even, and then my favorite thing to do, we do like this. If we're reading through some melody flashcards and just say there's a particular melodic pattern that trips them up, that will become our response after we're done with that particular activity. And then each person in the class will go around and they'll have to sing a solo, and I'll give them a few, a set of pictures to use. So I think about like last week, we were struggling with just really, finding Ray. So I had students I said, hey, you're going to solo, but in your solo, it's just one measure, 4 beats. However you get there, it can be however create the 4 beats. You're only going to use do and re. And so the solo will come, and they'll sing a measure, and then our response would always be, whatever was the challenging melodic pattern of the day, and then I will play an accompaniment on the piano, or I'll try to make it some type of hip to cool type of thing. I was just trying to find ways to spice it up a little bit. But yeah, definitely. And I use a tuning fork as well when I'm in, and I try to, with the sight reading and stuff like that, I don't even go by the piano. I don't touch it. So they don't think, can you play? No, I cannot. Do you know where do is at? We better find our way back home. So that's that's my thing.
That's what we do too. If we're off, if we've lost track of things, I will just tell the whole class, sing do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care where we are in the music, sing do. And even if some kids can't remember, somebody will remember.
Yes.
And it's gonna come from somebody. And I don't care if it's one kid, and they'll get back on. But that's interesting. And I love that story. And I'm also a firm supporter, by the way, of having kids sing by themselves, which apparently has become controversial in itself. But just because it's mean or whatever. But I don't really, I think that's hugely important, because if you can't hear yourself sing like ever,
mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, there's just no way to get better. Like you can't develop your own instrument if you never hear it by yourself.
I want to say what you just said. I have one student in a joking way. She says, "You're a bully." One day she called me a bully, and I said, and I understand what she was saying. And so she said it again, and I kind of brushed it off. She said it one more time another day. I said, "Hey, come here. What do you mean by I'm a bully?" "Oh, because you make us sing by ourselves." I said, "Huh? How?" I said, "How am I a bully because I'm mean, or I'm asking you to sing along?" She says, "Because." Of course, right. She says, "Oh, because if I don't do it, I'm gonna get a 0." But here's a funny thing about what you just said about, and I know that is controversial, but and once again, my experience, I start that, having students sing by themselves in September. Now, what happens is you weed some students out right away too. I'll say, "Hey," and I'm pretty straightforward and just to the point here. "All right, we're gonna go around. You're gonna sing a major scale. You're gonna sign and sing by yourself, no piano." They're looking at me like, "Wait, by ourselves?" I said, "Yeah." So then I said, "Who's going first?" "Oh, you're first. Who's second?" "Okay, all right. You're third. Okay, you're fourth." They're looking at me like, "Is he serious?" In September, they're looking around like, "Are we doing this?" It's like, and then I tell people by November, they have no problem singing by themselves. Like right now, my entire class, if I call on them and sing something, I mean, the person probably may not even have the best sounding voice instrument. They'll try alone. And I'm like, wow.
It's just ripping off the Band-Aid. You just got to rip off the Band-Aid at the beginning of the year. We voice kids at the beginning of the year. I just pull out the roster and I point to kids at random because we don't know them yet by then. And we sing like My Country 'Tis of Thee or God Bless America or some tune that we work on. It's just so I can hear. I explain to them, I just need to get to know your voice, and I need to know if you have a high voice or low voice, or what key sounds really good for you. And we just go kind of rapid fire. Each kid is up for 30 seconds, and that's it. And at first they're scared, but when they, exactly like you said, when they look around, they realize everyone else is doing it, then they just do it. And then by November, I would agree about the same as for me. If we're working on a piece of music and we've got a trouble spot and not being able to quite figure out who is the trouble.
Mhm.
Okay, sing measure 22, go. Okay,
Mhm.
pretty good. Your turn, go.
Mhm.
Oh, yep. Oh, could you fix the third beat there? Because I didn't get high enough. Okay, go again. Okay, next person, go. And it stops being a drama.
Yes.
It is a critical skill for kids to learn. And it's also, Odell, it's school. And
Yes.
in any other class, your teacher, you cannot hand in somebody else's work.
Yeah.
You can't go to your math teacher and say, oh, you know what? Trust me, my neighbor did this right, and I watched her, and I can do it too. Don't worry about it.
Yes. And, you know, and I told my students, I said, "What happens when your teacher calling you to read aloud? Do you say no? Maybe you do." But I said, "Listen," and but I said, "Yeah, I can kind of see." But you know what's funny too? I was I with my students, like you said, and even now, it was funny. Actually, today, you know, it was after school rehearsal, and everyone did not show up. So in one group, I was missing about maybe about six sopranos, and so it was about three of them. They're sitting there saying, "Oh, we're singing by ourselves today." I said, "This is why we." I said, "You'll be fine." And so when it was time to just isolate them, we were doing the first movement of the Vivaldi's Gloria, and they were just like first they were first nervous at first, and then one said to the other, "We've been singing along all year. We can do this." And I was like, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah."
Mhm.
She says, "It's two of us. You know, that's better than having, you know." But I think what was interesting, what you said too, I was able during the piece to call on different people. I said, "Hey, can you model that for us? Can you sing that?" And they would try. And I started thinking, wow, in September, had I called them, they would have done it, but they would have hesitated, you know, kind of beat around the bush a little bit, and then I had to kind of pull the teeth to do it. But and as controversial that it is, I think, and it's my opinion again, I just can't see me teaching chorus and not having students sing along. I just can't. That's me, and
Uh-huh.
I mean that's just me. Once again, it's an opinion, and and I'm not gonna question other people as to, and you know, I get people who want to make people feel, you know, I guess comfortable, but I think right in that first class, I tell students you're going to be required to sing along. And I said, you know, and if you don't think you could do that, this class is not for you. Now, I'm building a program, so I'm weeding out as I'm bringing in, you
Right.
know, and so, but I needed to set that standard for students because, you know, when it's time to, and I told students, I said, because the idea, you don't have the, I don't have the advantage to, each of you get a one-on-one voice lesson. So I need to be able to kind of correct each of you one-on-one in that little time I can get when you're singing by yourself. And so
Yeah.
we've worked on that, and the point is, you know, that they're open to that, you know. But and through all of that too, I think we talk about the relationship piece in that article. I know Kelly mentioned the article in a way.
Right.
They'll do it if you have a relationship with them, or they feel, you know, because I've worked on that, and I tell you, at first, you know, I think, you know, sometimes I want to conclude later on too, maybe if I write again, is that there's really, I can't give a perfect timing on when that relationship might click and work out. You know, because I'm sitting there in like October saying, wow, I'm really trying to build a report. When is coming? When is coming? And I'm here in November, and and like, oh wow, Mr. Ziegler, you know, they want to come down and just sit in the class and hang out. But it takes time, and I think when I talked about really making it personal, when you personally, you know, make it, go out your way to personally, you know, get to know students independently, you know, that shows obviously that you care, and they will, you know, take that chance to sing by themselves, and they will work hard and try. And so that's also, as controversial as that is, I think that relationship piece helped with that and making them comfortable, because I'll leave that alone, the controversial piece of that.
Yeah, no, I think what you're touching on something really important there, and in fact, I'm glad you brought that up because it was in your article too. You listed some solutions to the problems that we talked about earlier, and one of those is building relationships. And in my situation, since we've established that you and I both do a similar thing, you know, I've been at the school that I currently teach at now. This is my 16th year there.
Wow,
I also grew up in the same town and went to the same school. So
nice.
in my situation, I'm fortunate because I can do whatever I want. And and the reason I can is because I've built relationships already.
Mhm.
You know, a third of my kids, I had their older siblings. I know their parents. I probably went to high school with their parents. There is a certain amount of trust that's already built up. And so for me, I would even take it one step further. I don't even lose kids by doing that, because if they come up and they say, "Oh, Mr. Muntz, I'm so scared to sing by myself. I'm not going to do it." And I'll say, "Yeah, it's not optional." And
Yes.
they'll say, "Oh, okay." And then they might try to quit, but then the guidance counselor will come walk over and say, "She's trying to quit." And I'm saying, "She can't quit." Okay. And so
I love it.
and so that and so we did. But then even the kid who might want to quit, and it doesn't happen very often, by the way, but even if that does happen, then that kid tries it, they suck it up, and then 9 times out of 10 they realize, you know what, I can do this, and they end up being good and being able to progress. But I will kind of circle back to something you said too, of how, you said that you don't see yourself as being able to teach in a setting where you don't hear kids sing by themselves, and I totally agree. I will be less polite than you, though, and I will say that if you want your choir to be really good, like a really high level choir, then you have to do it. You have to do it, and because each individual singer is
Uh-huh.
important.
Yes.
And they need to experience that, and they won't
Uh-huh.
experience it if they never sing by themselves. They need to hear their own voice, hear how
Mhm.
their own little tweaks of little things that they do matters, and then
Mhm.
they need to hear how much better it gets when everybody puts it back together. And
Yes.
because at that moment, then they go, "Wow, the little thing that I did, the little tweak that I did, that made everyone better." And then you've got them. Then you've hooked them.
Definitely, and so in my case, so this is actually my second year at the school I'm at now because I'm in Virginia now, and and I could see how that's working for you because I'm just thinking ahead in regards to next year and the year after. That's the culture that's going to be in place. You're
Hmm.
interested in chorus, you're going to have to sing by yourself. So, and because I was asking myself, I said, if I don't, because every setting I've been in, I've done that, sing alone, but nope, just you. And that's now it's a part of the culture. And so going forward, I mean, I'm year 9, I'm not there yet where I can have people's children's and things like that. I went to school with their people. I'm not from the area, no way, but eventually, that'll kind of just be the norm, and it's becoming
Hmm.
the norm now. So but and I'm glad to hear your story. I mean, I think that's a good story, teaching at your alma mater, and you having that connection with family members, because that's kind of the setup I almost had. I had an offer at my former high school in Illinois. I just didn't take it at the time. I was finishing my master's. I wasn't interested.
Right.
But I started thinking, wow, that's a huge advantage
It
in
is.
regards to really building those relationships. And so I did something today I thought was interesting, because I talk about, making that personal. So I try to get around a different day. And I just did a whole try to find this casual conversation starter. So I went around talking about Thanksgiving. Hey, what's that one thing you don't want to eat this week on Thanksgiving? That you're telling your mom, your nana, your grandma, you bet not put that on my plate. And the kids, I mean, just something like that. I thought that was just something simple. And I said, how about you? Or I ask, do you eat this? Okay. What's your favorite dessert? Or just stuff like that. And so they, and I'm speaking that out for the listeners who may potentially listen. Just a few other suggestions that I've been able to do, and things like that. So yeah, that's
Hmm.
I don't
That's
care when
awesome.
I live there. So
That's awesome. Hey, so can I give you a sight reading game to play?
hmm
Okay, you're gonna love this. So you gave one earlier and just popped into my head. This is one I
hmm
got. Strangely, I got this sight reading game from the physics teacher in my school.
hmm
Okay, so here's what he did. So in his physics class, he put like a very complicated physics worksheet up on a projector, and they had to work in a group to solve all the equations and the problems and stuff on the physics worksheet, and they had to do all the solutions and show all their work or whatever physics things. I don't really understand
hmm
physics, but there's lots of numbers, right? Lots of equations, and they have to turn it all in. They have to get to the end of the entire end of the worksheet with tons of stuff written on, and then they have to tell the teacher, okay, I think we're done, I think we've got it all right. And then the teacher's response is either yep or nope, and he doesn't tell them anything about. If it's nope, they don't get any information about where the mistake was, which means that then as a group they have to go all the way back to the beginning and recheck everything. And then finally they're not done with the assignment until he says, yep, it's all right, they've all worked together. And so he's explaining this to us in a staff meeting once, and I was like, wait a minute, okay, we could do that with sight reading. And so that's what we do every once in a while. So we'll bring down the kids in groups of 8 to 10 or whatever, and they get an exercise appropriate for their level, right? So nothing crazy hard, appropriate for wherever they're reading. And they have to, as a group of 8 to 10, sight read the exercise. And they get no help from me at all. And if it's even slightly wrong, I just say, nope, not quite done. Do it again. And then they get 30 seconds to practice as a group. They have to collaborate. They have to talk to each other about, hey, I think we were late here on beat 1 or whatever. And then they just do it until they're done. And it's so much fun. And we do a competition, like the group that gets it in the least amount of tries gets candy. And it's pretty awesome.
So now, does each group get the same example, sight reading example?
Well, we use Sight Reading Factory.
Okay, yep, got it. Yep, I have it.
Yep. So that way everybody gets a level 3 or everybody gets a level 2.
To the next one. Yep, got it.
And then they get a new one, but it's fair, quote unquote, because it's all the same
level. Yep. Okay.
I really love it. They start cheering for each other, and you get one group is at 4 tries and the other group's on their 3rd try, and there's like a lot of that competitive intensity, and it's pretty fun. It's pretty fun. Well, Odell, we're gonna wrap this up here pretty soon. This is so much fun. I feel like I found a kindred spirit.
Thank you. I want to say I'm definitely going to do that now. I am.
It's good
because anytime you bring that competition or friendly competition in the classroom, you're making it fun, and it's literacy. There we go.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I want to, before we go, I want to kind of touch on the end of your article, as you kind of wrapped up your thesis here. And so I want to read a little bit to the audience. A second, let me get to the scroll to the right place. We've talked a lot of the things we've talked about. So relationship building, making it fun, the unconventional approaches to the conventional results. Right. Essentially, these are all the same things that we all want, no matter where you go to school, no matter where you teach, but there might be different paths. And so you write, as cliche as it sounds, relationship building would be number 1 on my list. These are of the solutions. As you know, students will always try their best to succeed in a space where they feel valued and connected. I do not want to give you a script, but I would suggest focusing on individual relationships and being intentional about getting around to speak to different students before the bell rings, during breaks, etc. And I highlight that because in a lot of ways, what you just wrote there, I don't even know that I would call that a teaching method. That's just a human method.
Love that.
And it's just because when students see that their teacher is somebody who is just a normal human, but a normal human who cares about them and whether or not they're okay and whether or not they're doing well, it doesn't matter what you're trying to teach them, they will try at that point. And is that something that you feel like that insight is something that took you a while to become comfortable and or to discover, or is that something that you feel like you've always intuitively known?
So I've always known that, and once again, the unconventional approach of teaching for me, when I was in grad school, I did independent study. I had heard from a few colleagues in this particular place that, this particular school is so bad, behavior-wise, it's so bad. I said, what's the problem? I'm telling you, this class, they run around, they sit everywhere, they're standing up, I can't get them to get into a circle. So this is something I still need to develop, this particular research. So I did this independent study, and I did it at a few different schools that was quote unquote behaviorally challenged in different districts.
Mm-hmm.
And my independent project was pretty much seeing how receptive they would be to me if they felt they had autonomy. So I went in this particular school, and Lord behold, the teacher was correct. I walked in, there were students everywhere. But I had already written this up in regards to how I would approach this. And I said, it's going to be dangerous. I'm taking a risk here. I started teaching right where they were at. You had one sitting in the teacher chair, some standing up, some were sitting on the carpet. We just started teaching. And they joined in. Because I was a new face, a new body. The teacher was looking at me, he's like, huh? And so in a way, I met them where they were at. and some people say, well, that's kind of wild, but I gave them the autonomy in regards to, and this was general music, by the way, not chorus, because I couldn't have done that. But they were able to learn in the position they were most comfortable with. If you want to stand up in the corner, stand up there. You want to sit there, sit there. And one was actually seated in the teacher chair. I said, that's fine. As long as you participate, you can stand or sit wherever you want. We started teaching.
Uh-huh.
And a connection came right there. It clicked for me. I said, you know what? They feel a sense of control. They feel that I'm, allowing them to make some type of decision, but also I care about just pretty much how comfortable they are and where they want to in regards to their posture. So that was early on then, but then after that, I just found myself, I said, okay, you know, and it just comes from my upbringing too, just really being, not just, really, you know, being, I want to say, loving people, sharing encouragement. This is kind of how I grew up with saying positive things to certain people because you never know what they're going through. And so I just started doing that. I started kind of being a person who would go around with my students and check in and, ask, questions outside of choir, outside of music. And so I've done that. And I found that when I started doing that, those students, you started watching, the next couple classes, they would come into class and they'd be ready to learn and they're just excited because they feel like I care. And
Mm-hmm.
so I just feel like I've always done that, and it makes a difference. And I like how you said it's just a human thing. It's not even a because, and people define it as leadership. This is a leadership thing. It's just a human thing. And I love how you said that because I've just like I said I've always done that, and the results of that I think has been has been great. So to answer your question, I think I've always had that, and it came through me just really trying out certain things. Now, obviously, you got to put a harness on on some stuff
Yeah.
because some so you give some people an inch, they'll take a whole mile yard. So, but I think really just trying to get to know students one on one independently, each student, and seeing what they like, seeing what they dislike, seeing what makes them tick,
Yes.
that has been extremely helpful. And one of the things I just shared, one of the things I do at the beginning of the year, I sent out a survey like most teachers do. It's a music survey, definitely incoming freshmen. Did you sing last year? Check if you sang in all state. Did you make all state? Did you do this? I just want to know what I have. Do you sing? What choirs do you sing in outside of the school? Do you sing in a church choir, community choir? So I have all that. But then I also ask, what is something you like? What do you dislike? All these questions. And so there's times I'm sitting in class and I'm teaching, and I'll say something, or a student says something. I say, hey, I know you like such and such, and their response is always, wait, how do you know that? And I said, the survey. Oh, you really read that? And then so then I start having that moment. So, you start building connections with students through surveys and really just studying and seeing what they like and dislike. But
Mhm.
I know I went on a tangent, but they asked you the question. I think, and me personally too, some people just have that in them and some people don't. There's some
Yeah.
people who are they just naturally, know how to just, love and encourage on people and, you know, things like that. There's some people who are just, that's just not their thing.
Right.
So
Well,
that's interesting.
those people don't end up being very good teachers, I'm afraid.
Oh
Uh,
my goodness. I see. I
I
try to be. I'm really being careful with everything I say, and I'm having a hard time because every time I talk, I know how these things go. I try to make because people are going to use everything you say against you. You know that. So I'm trying I'm hesitant. I'm going like this, and I'm trying. Okay, is this bias? Is this and am I inclusive? I'm thinking of all this stuff. But yes.
so here's the real tea, Odell. There is a reason that this is the number one choir podcast in the world, and that is because it's real talk.
Yeah.
We just talk on this show like normal people.
Yeah.
But no, it's true because I think what ends up happening, and I say that I'm gonna claim the ability to make that statement because unlike you, I did not always have that. I had to learn it. And because the 24-year-old me was a total toxic masculinity mess, and I was not who I am now, and I had to learn it the hard way. I came out of graduate school to teach in a high school program that was already pretty large, and I had it in my mind at that point. I was 25 at that time that I was going to step into that high school program in front of these high school kids, and I was going to impress them with my knowledge. And because of my knowledge, they were going to be the best high school choir in the world. And I didn't have to make relationships with them. Instead, I had to make just awesome noises, and they would just that would be all we need. And of course, I didn't think about it that way explicitly. I just, looking back on it now, I was like, that was, and those kids hated me. They absolutely hated me. It was not a good relationship until I finally built some relationships myself with those kids over time, and I started realizing they don't care what I know until they know that I care.
Hmm.
And then now, of course, my kids really look up to me and my knowledge, and they do tell me, like, Mr. Muntz, it's so cool how much stuff you know. Well, but that's because I already built the relationship.
Yes.
Like, they want to know what I have to share. And so you are absolutely right. And I'm a better teacher now because I learned that. And so that's an extremely important point that, of course, I think everybody knows it, but you still have to have an
Well,
experience.
and I would say, and I was thinking back to my time when I was in chorus and band, and or even when I was in college. All the conductors or the teachers who would just give general greetings, right? You can definitely as a college student coming in sleepy, was in the practice room all night, not feeling my best. Maybe don't have a lot of money in my pocket as a college student. How's everyone doing? And I'm sitting there like, whatever, fine, whatever. In fact, I don't have to answer because everyone's going to chant maybe good, okay. They won't hear me, right? That's a general greeting, and I started noticing a lot of this general approach to just getting to know students. You know, how midterms coming up, right? When are midterms? Are you guys practicing for your finals? And hands are going up, and this is just chaotic in a way too. And then, but it wasn't until I went to graduate school. Graduate school, I had a professor, and obviously graduate school, there's a little bit more professors work a little closer with students who made it just a thing to just forget the piano lesson right now, forget the vocal lessons. Let's talk. How are you? And I
Hmm.
said, and I started thinking to myself, I've never had this, and it just made all the difference. It made a huge difference, and then when I started teaching, that was my approach to and I because I some of the schools I taught, and right away people said they were behavior schools, and I heard all these things, and I'm like, whatever, they don't keep a music teacher. I was like, okay, I don't care about none of that. I'm going to here's my that's my first job. I'm gonna try this thing out. And I started asking students, hey, what do you like? Or what do what's your favorite food? I mean, some is your favorite food. A lot of people are foodies. You ask,
Hmm.
what's your favorite food? Outside, things like that, or. And it was just definitely if you have a diverse, group of kids, you can start asking coach about your coach, hey, for this, what do you do? And and I know this is kind of circular stuff we're saying, but it's true. It's just really the ideal of really getting to know students individually.
Hmm.
And once that happens, like you said, they don't think you're a genius, even if you're not. They really look forward to learning from you when they understand you really care about them. And something simple I did, and I'll share this. This past week, Virginia had held their Music Educators Association conference, VMEA. So I went, and I remember a couple of students talking about they were interested in VCU. Now, I went over to the exhibit hall and they were actually set up there. And I talked about Virginia Commonwealth. I said, oh, I have a few students interested in going into music education, 12th graders. They said, oh, nice. So I took the time and kind of told them about my students, and they took down their email address and all this stuff, my name. And they gave me a lot of pamphlets and all this stuff to take back to my students. And I had questions for them, for my students. And then when I got back, last week, I met with those students and I talked about what I discussed with, the potential college that the college that they're interested in. And my student said, "You really did all that?" It's like, "Oh," I said, "Yeah." And I brought you back this, I brought you back that. And my student says, Mrs. Ziegler, you really care. And I think that was just and it made my day.
Yeah.
It says, you really sat there and you did all I could have done and I was going to reach out, but you really, and I said, yeah, I know you're interested. You've been talking about this school. They were there at the conference. Why not talk? I had some questions, and hey, you can go shadow, one of their students for the day. You can go on campus. Here's a pass. They gave me this, they gave me that. And so right away they were like, wow. So sometimes, even going out of the way, doing something that's not labor intensive, or it's not, and I don't think of these things as time consuming. I mean, it's when you love students and you love what you do, you want to make sure that they're happy and that they're always that they know that you always have their best interest in mind, and
Yeah.
that you take special interest in each of them. Because the idea that this whole teacher pet of your favorites, I don't do that. I don't have none of that. And I go around to every student, and even if there's a student that's an introvert, we find a way not to bring them out. I'm not trying to bring them out of their shell and make them an introvert. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm gonna find a way to get to know that introvert in the manner in which he or she wants me to. And so that's the relationship thing. So
Yeah, you know what, it's not a waste of time. In fact, even if you look at it from a perspective of just a rehearsal strategy itself, it's not a
mhm,
waste of time, because kids who feel comfortable will work with less inhibition,
mhm,
and which means they will sing more freely, they will work faster. They also, when they realize you care and they're getting off task or being squirrely or whatever, and you say, hey guys, it's time to work, we've got a concert next week, then they actually care to disappoint you. They don't want to disappoint you, so they will actually work faster. And so the idea of group building, like the concept of group building or relationship building, is not a waste of time, because you go faster in the long run. It's an
yes.
investment of time, that pays you back tenfold. So we are so on the same page on this. This was really a fun conversation. And so I want to wrap up with this. Just if you have any final thoughts for the audience, or even just off-topic things that you just think the choir world should be thinking more about, or you want them to dwell on as they sign off.
Wow. Okay. Well, I just kind of want to, and I'm not give you the overview of the article again, but I think what I want the audience to know is that there's various paths to music literacy, and I think that should be the goal. And just really understand who you have in front of you first. Take an inventory. And do what's best for your program. And I think that's what I want them to know and leave them with, and not be thinking about, well, this is how they do it over here, this is how they do it over here. It may not work for your program. You can
Mhm.
build it to that, but in the interim of what you have at the moment, you may have to do A, B, or C. Sorry. And so, there's a way there. The path, the route to get there may be different, but if you will get there. And I think that's just only that encouragement that you will get there.
Yeah.
But just know that the path or route may be different, and just relationships. I tell you with that. And if the conventional way is not working, think outside the box. Learn how to pivot in a way so that you can still keep that teaching and learning segment flowing and going, and your students are invested and they don't feel defeated, but they feel like you care because you've met them where they're at.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Abdel, thank you so much for spending some time with us, and I appreciate your insights.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you, as always, for sticking around to the end of an episode. If you enjoyed or found that conversation helpful, or any episode that you listen to on the Choralosophy podcast, I would encourage you and implore you to help out. And that could be, like I said at the beginning of the show, using the promo code at any of the sponsors, joining the Patreon. But even if that's not a step you're able to take, like, comment, share, leave a rating, in any type of internet forum that you can find content for the show. Traffic helps. Traffic helps me get the word out. So any of those types of things are very helpful. And of course, tell your friends in person also, hey, I found this podcast that's basically like free PD that comes into my pocket for free every month. You should check it out. Right? Any way that you can help spread the word is very helpful. I appreciate you listening. Don't forget to reach out on Choralosophers on the Facebook page. You can also reach me through the main page of the website at choralosophy.com. We'll see you next time.